G'day everyone, this is Expand the Phantom Podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com and you can subscribe to our podcast via YouTube or through your favourite podcast app wherever you're listening to this one. Please give us a rating which will help other fanatics to find us. Welcome to episode 273. This is our review of the 2024 Frew Annual entitled the Graham Nolan Collection. This is the second part of the Graham Nolan collection for those who came in late. Part one was in the 2023 annual, which we discussed about this time last year, funnily enough, and completes the Frew gathering of all of Graham Nolan's Phantom work, which is pretty cool. Well, not quite all. We'll discuss that as we go through. For this year's annual, it consists of, well, it depends how you want to look at it, but 13 stories. 6 of them are Graham Nolan Sundays. There's also one that was that he wrote that was originally published by Team Fantomen, and 5 of them which come together as 5 chapters to make a single story. So that's where I was sort of saying how you want to think about the 13. But it's 5 chapters from a Moonstone story, one of which was illustrated by Graham Nolan. And of course, this year we also have another replica. In this case, it's issue number 34. And that's Graham Nolan's got nothing to do with that one. Anyway, please sit down, grab yourself a milk or a glass of wine if you're a bit more of a postmodernist fan, or happy with sitting and listening or watching us as we review and discuss the 2024 Frew Phantom Annual. My name's Dan Fraser, and today I'm joined by Stephen East and Jermayn Parker. Let's start with Steve. How are you, mate?
I'm doing really well, Dan. Thanks for asking. It's a nice, beautiful day out down here in Ballarat. I think it's 36 degrees, so I thought I'd make the best of the weather and actually do a podcast outside rather than locked up in my car.
Beautiful. It is good to see you in sensible daylight hours too. We're often recording in your car approaching midnight. So yeah, happy to be doing this on a Sunday afternoon. And over in the West, Jim, how are you?
Yeah, good. It's a cool 23 over here. We've just come off a week of 38 plus with about 50% humidity. So enjoyed sleeping with the blanket on the last couple of nights.
Very good. All right. Now, before we go too much further, Germ, we've got to pull you up on something, a big mistake that you actually made in our last podcast when we reviewed some Frew stories, the December and January comics and news. You stuffed up, and it's time for you to read through your prepared statement to acknowledge your error.
Yes, I do have a prepared statement. So yes, in the last episode, I blamed Shane Foley for creating a tribe in his story. This was a question that Steve threw at me, and I got it wrong. I have a real bugbear, and that is when creators create tribes. So the tribe that he used was the Mugunda, and they were featured in a story before. That was the story in 1993. That 1993 story was very average, and that's why I do not remember it. I've just ignored it totally. Thankfully, Shane was not offended, but he did enjoy correcting me. So this is my prepared statement for apologising to Shane, and yeah, I get it wrong occasionally.
Very good. Thanks, Jerm. And we can all see how much that hurt you to say. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that a copy of podcast 273 does get clipped and emailed to your wife so that she can snip out that bit where you quite clearly said that you were wrong, and she'll be able to replay that as she sees fit.
Don't give her ideas.
Okay, look, let's hook into it. As we said, we're going to review issue 20. What is it? 1962 is the actual issue number of the Frew Annual, and we're going to read through that. We said, as I said, there's six Sunday stories, as well as a story that's originally been published by Team Fantomen. Now, to save us going through and scanning the Frew, we do actually have, when we share, if you're watching on this on YouTube, as we share the panels that we're talking about, they will be in color because they have been taken or scanned from the original Sundays as they were published about 20 years ago. And That's what you'll see on your screen. But as they've been published in Frew, it's a black and white book for the first 7 stories. Those ones that I just mentioned, the Sundays and the Team Fantomen. Then the last 5 stories, the Moonstone chapters, are in colour in this book. So just to explain the difference there, please don't freak out and think that we got a special colour copy of the annual. We did not. We just haven't gone through and scanned all 244 pages of it just for the pod. So that's something we'll come back and we'll cycle back and talk about at the end. That color option. But let's start by working through the stories. It's a pretty standard. Layout, etc. from Frew. They've got their message from the publisher. Then there's the contents page, which I always appreciate. And then for each of the stories, there's a splash page, which gives the title of the story, a little bit of a snapshot of some of the scenes. And crucially, this is a bit I really enjoy every annual, reading about when it was first published and when it was first published, where it was first published, and when it was most recently published by Frew. Now, in the case of the Sundays, as I said, almost exactly 20 years ago, the first story was first published in 2004 in the Sundays and by Frew in 2004. And we see that as we go through each of these Sundays is that they were first published by Frew and also most recently published by Frew, only ever once before, in the same year that they arrived in the newspapers. So anyway, without any further ado, we get into the Viking Fortress mystery. Now, I'll get Steve to give us a bit of a synopsis of the plot in a moment, but for the first couple of stories, people might think that they recognise these stories, that they've seen them somewhere else before. That's because 2004 was also the year that Tony DePaul had a pretty serious motorcycle accident, was off work for a period of time, and to keep the Sunday stories and the daily stories going, they used some of the plots that he'd already written for Team Fantomen. And so the Viking Fortress mystery is one that is a remake of Team Fantomen's story, which was published in 1997. That was called the Viking Castle Mystery. So that might be why it sounds familiar or read as familiar as you went through it. Anyway, Steve, over to you. Can you give us a bit of a synopsis of the Viking Fortress mystery?
Okay, the Viking Fortress mystery. A mysterious Viking fortress has resurfaced off the Mori coast, bringing panic and fear to the Mori. The Mori remember well the curse that this fortress placed on their forefathers when it was first built. Can the Phantom discover why the fortress has resurfaced now? And can he discover a way to overcome the curse before it not only wipes out the Mori, but the 21st Phantom's ability to continue as well?
So, Jem, we'll throw to you first. What did you make of the Viking Fortress? Well, when was the last time you read it?
Be a couple of years, I think, apart from probably the Trial of the Assassin, which we'll be reviewing today, and maybe one or two others. It's probably been a good 5, 6, 7 years. So I've enjoyed going back and reading these stories. We perhaps get the genesis of when Claes Remifi created those gladiator stories of the Phantom and the Phantom Crusader and all that, where they explore that the Phantom's lineage was before 1536. So, it was an interesting story. I enjoy Graham Nolan's artwork. There was a few panels that I really enjoyed, like from like a comedic type of things, which was towards the end, or when Guran was on Hero's horse, and then he's like, "Oh, you've gotten rid of me already. You're riding my horse," and so there was a few of those little elements as well that I enjoyed as well.
Yeah, Guran had a few cool lines in this one too, when they were going into and we probably should say that with all of these, we're probably going to expect that people have read the book because, there's going to be spoilers in amongst the stories. But when Garan and the Phantom go into the city to check out the fibers of the timbers under a microscope, as Moz told them to look at it 30,000 times, when they went in to check it under a microscope at a 30,000 times magnification, Garan makes the comment about, no decent jungle person feels comfortable in city clothes, and he's wearing a little trench coat as well. So not only we've had conversations about what is good Mr. Walker garb. Back in 2004, Tony DePaul certainly still had Mr. Walker in the trench coat and fedora, and in this story he had Garan in it as well. So I enjoyed that.
I was actually looking out for that in all these Tony DePaul stories. What was the Phantom wearing then? He's in the trench coat and hat every story. There was one, I think it's in the next story, where he takes clothes of somebody else. I thought, is this where he gets the bomber jacket? But no, he's got another raincoat and the hat.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, and we talk about, you mentioned little nuggets and that sort of stuff there, Jerm, and I certainly was keen to. I didn't remember a story, probably because these fantastical ones and the pretend Vikings and Gladiator ones I tend to not enjoy as much, and probably don't remember them like you and your 1993 Maguna tribe story. So I was curious to remember the story, trying to remember the story where their Phantom had come across a Viking buried deep in the Skull Cave. But I was also thought that with the benefit of hindsight and just coming off the Rack and Ruin series, for instance, there's a couple of little references. If I go to page 14, there's the Sunday actually ends with next Phantom's End.
I saw that.
Is the Phantom that died? It's called Phantom's End, which I thought was pretty cool. And then on page 24, like we've had a couple of instances here where the Phantom feels like he might actually die in this situation. And at the bottom of page 24, if these torpedoes explode now, I will be the first Phantom entombed in a place other than the crypts of the Phantoms in the Skull Cave. The rings of the first Phantom would be buried here with me, denied the generations of Phantoms to come. Unthinkable. And yet that's exactly the plotline. I wonder if is that been ticking away in the back of Tony's mind for 20 years, as he sort of hinted at here.
Unlike his predecessor, who I don't think kept any notes and would change things up from story to story. Do you think Tony's kept a fair few notes, and even this one from 20 odd years ago, it's just been bubbling along?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously just an idea that he's obviously liked the idea of the 21st Phantom dying away from the Skull Cave, and not being able to be returned. So, yeah. But look, other than that, I thought it was a pretty clever story. The idea of this Viking fortress that was forced to be built by the Maori, so they sneakily built it out of timbers that they from their forbidden forest because they knew that would bring bad luck. Didn't realize how much bad luck it was going to bring to them as much as it probably did. And then the idea of the volcanic fissures, raising it up out of the surface, out of the water, and then detonating the torpedoes. I just mentioned those to sink it back again. I thought this was a really entertaining, rollicking story. He's got the Phantom being the detective, as I said, going into the city to check out the stuff under the also stealing a warship so that he can borrow some torpedoes and that sort of thing. It's I really enjoyed this story.
Yeah, I thought the stealing of the torpedoes, it was the Navy that he stole those from, and not the Jungle Patrol, wasn't it?
Correct, yeah, because he mentions about how Luaga won't mind if I pinch this or borrow this from his fleet.
Yeah, so it total side subject. We won't dwell on it long, but it'll be interesting whether, from what I understand, the Jungle Patrol does have a fleet. I guess he probably didn't have time to go be unknown commander and ask for, a jet boat with some torpedoes, and it was just quicker and easier to steal something or borrow something from the Navy. But
this story, along with all the rest of it, all have a certain theme or certain pacing throughout the story, which is fun. That they're not too heavy. And they're all enjoyable, for lack of a better word. They're just an enjoyable little story.
Yeah, the Trial of Assassins is probably the heavier.
That one gets a bit darker. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the heavier of them. Where you're right, the others follow a fairly standard classic, fun. Love that word. They're fun stories, but then you have your darker ones, which there's a good mix.
Yeah.
And I think we
And I
even
think this.
see that mix even today, where we've now
Oh
got
yeah.
this chain story, which is a little bit more fun compared to the last saga, which was the 2-year-old Rack and Ruin
Yeah.
saga.
I think it comes back to, well, Tony being in the motorcycle accident and needing something a bit light, I guess, to help get through everything.
Yeah.
So let's hinge off that and look at the next story, which was also a remake of a story that Tony had written years before and had been published in Team Fantomen. It was initially written as The Ghost Train, and again, they reused that script and gave it to Graham Nolan to be done as the Sunday story. Used as the Sunday story. As the Sunday story got renamed as The Iron Python. And Steve, I'll hand over to you again if you've got your screen up to go through the plot.
Okay, thank you, Dan. When an old steam train starts thundering its way through the peaceful jungles of Ivory Lana, local tribesmen board the train to investigate. They are greeted with a macabre sight as the ghosts of passengers long past seem to come alive before their eyes. They call the Phantom in to investigate. Can the Phantom get to the bottom of why the passengers are scaring the locals? And can he find out what that terrible smell is in the mountain tunnel? And what do the authorities in Rhodia have to do with it all?
I do enjoy your plots, Steve. You've got the pressure on you to deliver in the plot range.
I do want to say something about the explosive conclusion, but I've missed the line to get it up. But there is an explosive conclusion.
Very, very much is when all the chickens come home to roost, so to speak.
Now, I'll be interested to know, because this story is kind of done in a bit of a who done it, like you're kind of going along the adventure, trying to figure out why the train goes up, comes back down. What's that noise? What's that smell? It'll be interesting when if people actually picked up what was the reason for all that stuff before the Phantom did. It kind of reads like a novel where you kind of along with the passenger passenger, the Phantom, who is also a passenger, I guess. Where you're there with the Phantom trying to figure out what this adventure was, and I kind of enjoyed that different type of storytelling in this one.
The story was familiar because I have read it before, and I've certainly read The Ghost Train as well. Like over a decade, I wouldn't have thought. So it was familiar, but I was certainly not ahead of the Phantom in terms of figuring out what was happening next, I must say.
Yeah, he knew something was happening in the tunnel, but had no idea what it was.
Yeah. One of those classic stories, I guess. It was really cool to see the jungle people again notifying the Phantom. It says of an issue in their area. He's come along to work out what's going on. Spends a couple of days solving the problem, and then delivering retribution to the guys who are causing, at the end of the day, are causing environmental damage to Bengali. Very clear that through this period of his writing, well, I suppose it continues today, doesn't it? But that Tony DePaul really loves the Rhodians as a bad guy.
Yeah, oh look, they are good bad guys.
Really, aren't
they? Yeah, and the other thing I really liked, especially about this story, was the artwork of the bad guys. They had that ghoulish look. They were dressed up as in with the horror look and all that. And just some of these panels here, which if you see them on screen, at the bottom there, you've got this guy. They look like, and Graham Nolan loves his horror themed stuff as well. So he would have enjoyed drawing these, I reckon. And some of the action and some of the storyline, some of the action scenes is quite fascinating in this. The other thing that's actually interesting is the original Team Fantomen story has actually never been published by Frew.
That's interesting.
Right. Well, maybe I haven't read The Ghost Train then.
So the original story was drawn by Henya Bade, and it was done in 1997. And yeah, it's been published in Finland, Norway, and Sweden, but not in Australia.
But you quite the difference in the artwork there with Bade doing it.
Oh, look, I don't know. Jim Shepard.
That'd be an interesting comparison.
Jim Shepard didn't always publish all the stories. There's the bomber jacket, and that you were talking about, Stephen, which is on the 1st of
Yeah, it's
September.
not actually a bomber jacket. Yeah, He's nicked it off somebody else. It's not actually a bomber jacket.
Yeah, I did enjoy that sequence because the Phantom, as he often does, he's been doing it since Wilson McCoy days, pinching a costume off a bad guy to slip in amongst the bad guys. He was quite particular. No, not you. Your hat's no good. I don't support that football team.
Yeah.
I'm not that hat. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was enjoyable. So while we were talking about Rhodia, I also like the fact that there was an adventure based in Ivory Lana as well. Because when you think about it, the Phantom's country, well, the Phantom, in a sense, the Phantom's country, which is, the Deep Woods, the tribes of Longo and Wambezi and the 400 other tribes that every other creator's created and stuff like that as well. That would include the territory of Ivory Lana, the territory of Rhodia, Uglan, if it still exists, Tarakimo, and all these other type of places. So it was good to see, in a sense, the Phantom also fighting crime in another country, but still in the jungle, if that kind of makes any sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, this whole book is based around the artwork of Graham Nolan. If I can just highlight one panel, and I agree with what you said, Jerm, about the depiction of the bad guys in their horror outfits. But on page 54, or it's the 27th of February, as you scroll through the Sundays, Germ, there's a panel of the Phantom shoveling. There it is, shoveling coal into the furnace of the train, and to build up a good head of steam, and to have that, where we, the viewer, are actually inside the furnace and the Phantom is shoveling coal towards us. I thought that was a really nice, really effective point of view to have that particular scene. Just to highlight that one panel.
Yeah, I really enjoyed what Graham Nolan did with his Sunday Rain. I think his artwork was good. I think he brought the standard of the artwork to the Sundays/dailies, even though he only did the Sundays, but to the newspapers. I think he brought that level up, was high. And then it's just continued with some of the artists that has followed Graham as well. And look, the stories are solid. The stories are, in my opinion, are not any worse or any better off than some of the ones around it. But the artwork, in my opinion, has brought the stories up to a higher level as well. And yeah, I'm very grateful for what Graham's done, and I enjoyed this story. I enjoy the artwork. I enjoy those panels. And there's a bit of fun in some of the stories as well. Yeah,
for sure. All right. Well, we move on to the next story, which is the 162nd Sunday story, the Prince Rex conspiracy. This one was first published in 2005, and again, that was the last time we saw it in a Frew. And we talk about fun stories and dark stories. It's a pretty dark story when you've got bad guys who are prepared to unleash chemical or biological germ warfare on their the entire population of their city. Steve, do you want to take it away?
Once again, there are others in Baron Khan who demand to see the return to the old ways and will do whatever is in their power to make it happen. In this story, Prince Rex receives a visit from his childhood friend Tom Tom. During his visit, both he and Prince Rex, as well as the citizens of Baron Khan, are struck down with a terrible virus that only the army seems immune to. The army, that is, except for Rex's personal guard, Captain Lara. The royal physician's antidote does not seem to be helping. In fact, Rex is getting a lot worse and seems close to death. Can the Phantom crush the conspiracy before it's too late, or will modern germ warfare be the tool to finally return Baron Khan to the 15th century?
Well done.
Well,
So this is the first time we see Captain Lara. And perhaps now what's interesting, and you'll see it at the last panel, is it was Captain Lara who had eyes for Tom rather than Prince Rex. But I guess absent makes, with Tom not around too much more, her attention grew towards Prince Rex, and that's where the whole love triangle kind of has happened.
she doesn't have a lot of lines in this story, though, does she? She's very much just in the background type character.
She's a silent authority. She doesn't need to say anything, but her presence just demands respect.
Now, the problem I have with this story is that I think Tom it's just some of his dialogue was a little bit simplified and kind of made him seem a little bit, I'm just trying to think. I don't think he was portrayed in the best way he could have been. Like, he was educated the same as Rex. And in Lee Falk's stories, he was always had fluid speak. He didn't have like that pigeon type of language. So that's probably just something that I didn't really kind of like about this story. But yeah, apart from that, it wasn't bad.
On that same sort of trial there, Jim, I've noticed a lot with the way all these stories are set up. It reminds me of Cy Barry and Lee Falk days. The way that the speech, they use ellipses a few times, and the pacing of it is a lot different to what we're seeing in today's Sundays and dailies, where we get full sentences, where we don't have to fill in the gaps. It's very much like what Lee Falk would do, and give half a sentence there, then a little bit more of a sentence there, if you catch my drift.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Like it's a very astute point that you made there, Steve. Having the dialogue being portrayed differently. That was probably from about the 70s or the 80s onwards. The dialogue that Lee Falk added was very, like disjointed or so yeah. It would be an interesting bit of research that maybe you can do later, Steve, in between writing all the plots, where you can look at, where that writing style has changed, and then maybe when it's gone back to where it is currently.
Yeah, interesting point. A little bit of investigation for myself.
One of the things I really like about Nolan's artwork is the different faces he puts on the Phantom, and I think that we see his angry Phantom is as angry as anyone. I'm looking at it's page 78, 79 in the book. That's the 14th of August, and I guess the one prior to that, if you can find it there, Germ, for the YouTube viewers. Where are we? Yeah, that's it. That's it. Go back one. So that's the 14th of August. You can. Oh, hang on. It's set up sort of differently. Go back another one. Yeah, so you've got that's perfect panel there. So you've got the Phantom absolutely furious at this doctor, and you can see the seriousness on his face when he's talking to the bad guy and really getting up in his face. Isn't that right, villain? And then in the very next panel, he's giving Rex a hug, and his face is completely changed, and he's a caring, happy Phantom, I suppose. So the way that Nolan brings different facial expressions to the character, I think, is a real talent that he's got, and one that works really, really effectively for him.
Yeah, good point. And the use of the shadow as well, like with the, like the black and white, there's a lot of how he's done his colors with how Jason Paulus does his colors, where it's a lot of the flat backgrounds or the flats that has kind of brought depth and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. And even in the black and white of the comic book, and if you flick to the next panel there, Jim, it's got the shadow. That is the 4th of August one. It's got the shadow of the blinds coming across the Phantom's face. Might be the previous one in that, page 79 if you're in the book. But even in the black and white, the shadowing works really, really effectively, I think. Yeah, there it is there, top of that page.
I was actually wondering what that was going to look like in colour, because it works really well in the black and white.
Yeah.
Looks like a bit of a Tigers fan there.
But yeah, but that works just as well. And it's literally one color, and then two colors. You've got the blue, and then you've got the yellow. So he's an Eagles fan.
With the black stripe.
2004 was back when they played well too.
I wonder, have we seen Tom since this story? I don't think we have.
Not that it comes to mind, but my memory is nothing to go by.
20 years of Sundays, or you would think we probably have. But anyway.
Yeah, I reckon we might have not.
Well, there's a little bit of research for you, Jim.
Yeah, we'll have a bit of a look. And it might even be the last time we've seen Rex in a Sunday or daily as well.
Not sure. All right, well, let's move on. The real change of pace, and we've mentioned On the Trail of an Assassin a couple of times. It's the 163rd Phantom Sunday story. It was published over 2005 and 2006 and appeared in Frew 1445, which was published in 2006. Steve, can you give us an overview of the plot for this one?
The authorities in Moatan have intercepted intelligence stating that there will be an assassination attempt that will crush the peace process in the area. They know that the assassination will happen in New York City in 2 weeks, which rules out President Lawaga. So who could be the target? Can the Phantom find out who the target is and save them before the assassin completes their mission? And will the Phantom's brief rendezvous with Diana jeopardize the whole mission?
I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was a great detective story. Phantom tracking down the assassin, following him, being sure not to be seen himself, even though he knows that the guy he's following is every chance of spotting him. And the way that he pictures it all comes together as he spends a bit of time with Diana and then works out who the target is. I really enjoyed this story. It's probably the one of the better ones in the book, I think.
I reckon it's probably this, and then probably the Moonstone story are probably my two favorite of the 6, 7, or 13 that if you want to do it. I love the whole the tailing and the tailing aspect of it. The other thing that I really liked was just the adding of like elements of the lore and the continuity of the stories. So you've got the roadier again. You've got the kids going to school. You've got the old tropes of trying to sneak into the presidential palace to see Luaga without the palace guards seeing him. There's just I really enjoyed that. All it missed was when he was on the plane was a stewardess to ask him if he could take his hat or being stopped about trying to take the dog or devil into the plane. They were kind of like the only other missing little elements.
No, I agree with that. And I really, speaking of things that Tony DePaul is doing as an author through these, I like, well, it's quite explicit in this story where he's talking about how am I going to stop this assassin. It would be about the 15th of January panel, I think, Germ, page 101 if you're in the book, where the Phantom's sort of envisaging, right, how am I going to stop this assassin if I don't know who the target is? I can't save the target. Am I going to have to intervene at the moment where he's about to shoot? Will I be forced to save a life by taking one? The 20 Phantoms before me rarely use deadly force, even against this sort of man, if it's my duty to find another way, if fate will have it. So he really wants to, maintain that's that law that you're talking about. The Phantom doesn't kill. And he's going, well, I really shouldn't kill. Is that going to be my only choice, sort of thing? So, and that's a theme that comes through a few times in some of these stories.
Yeah, and he uses computers. He's using detective stuff. So I would like to see more stories like this. Obviously I don't want this story just cut a different way, but just, yeah, I enjoyed this story and I would like to see more.
It's one of the few stories where there's hints of a genuine adult relationship between the Phantom and Diana, if you like.
The
where
next story, it even goes
It
into a little bit
definitely is.
more.
Yeah, but just I don't think in the Cy Barrow days we would have had such a clear. The two of them get together. They've only got a couple of hours. I don't have much time. Isn't it kind of late to be up talking and the doors shut behind them?
Yeah.
I don't. That's a bit more explicit than we might have seen, and still very family friendly. But yeah.
And look, they live on different continents, different countries, a 20-hour flight away from each other. Of course, you're going to, what is it? Distance makes the heart fonder. I'm sure we've all been there when the wife goes away or you go away and you want to get those couple of little moments together. I liked it.
Another thing I really liked about, and I think this must be Graham Nolan. I can't imagine that Tony DePaul has asked him to do this, but on page 98, I think it's the 25th of December strip, as the Phantoms is tailing the killer. He's sitting at a railway station, and the killer walks behind him about to catch a train. The Phantom's reading a newspaper, and the headline is "Space Aliens Serving in Congress." Just a bit of fun. There's a couple of Fawkwas here, graffitis through the city as well, which is just obviously Graham Nolan having some fun with what he's doing.
The other thing that's worth making mention is, which I didn't actually remember this until I actually reread this story, is you've got a panel here which is on the the 9th and the 10th of the wedding, and you've got Mandrake and Lothar behind them. So it means that Graham Nolan is one of the only few actual artists who actually drew those two together. You've got just a couple at the top of my head. You've got Fred Fredericks, Cy Barry, of course, in the wedding. You've got, I believe it's George Olsen who did the retelling of this. You've now got Graham Nolan. You've got Terry Beattie as well. And then I don't think there was too many others. That actually, Alex Silviek, of course, in the Defenders of the Earth. So you're looking at maybe less than 10 artists have actually drawn a story with the two of them together. The Moonstone guys will probably be up in there soon as well. So that's a pretty cool feature from Graham Nolan as well.
Yeah, and he's done that particular panel really, really well. I had to do a double take on that, going, was that just lifted, or for the sake of a word, from Cy Barry? Was that Cy Barry's panel? Looking at the Phantom's face, no, I don't think it is. I think that Graham Nolan's actually drawn that, but the Diana and her bridal outfit and all the rest of it looks exactly like Cy drew her.
Yeah, no, he's done a good job of that. I just thought it was worth pointing that one out. What did you think about the gunfight towards the end? That was, and then I thought that was very intense, and I enjoyed it.
It was intense. I was wondering why the Phantom hadn't gone back upstairs to where he knew the rifleman was going to be, where the assassin was going to be. That in my head, as he was traveling, that's where he was heading to. And next thing you know, he's coming out and on the ground level, and he's really a sitting duck there. He's lucky to get out of that one alive.
I really enjoyed not only the fight and all that, but him saying, "I am out of lethal range. I am basically, a sitting duck," using your words. But he did it because it was his wife, and I'm sure we would be in the same situation where you would sacrifice yourself. And yeah, I would have liked him to maybe not die, just so we could maybe see another instance where they perhaps go against each other again.
He was a worthy opponent, and it was just a shame he had a bit of one misstep and he's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that sequence. It must have gone across 2 or 3 Sundays when it was initially published, and to 2, 3, 4 pages in this book. It was intense, and you did get a real sense of, well, I'm just, I'm going to fire these bullets that I know have got no chance of actually being effective. But then, of course, Phantom being the Phantom, even from 3 miles away, or whatever it is, quarter of a mile, he somehow
quarter mile.
he somehow manages to get a 45 pistol slug to do enough damage to, in fact, hit him twice. Got me with 2 spent rounds. So, yeah.
Enough to knock him. Not enough to be lethal, but enough to knock him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to distract him and give Diana a chance to get away or not be hurt. And, you know, he did a great job at it. Enjoyed the story a lot.
Let's move ahead to the Fire Peak tribe. So this is the next Sunday story, and Graham Nolan's second last Sunday story, as we would, as luck would have it, as things work out. The Fire Peak tribe, and it's the only story really in this whole sequence that picks up immediately after the last. Steve, if you want to take us through that.
Yes, it pretty much continues straight on from the assassination story. So after the adventures in New York, the Phantom decides to take Diana on a long-promised trip to Fire Peak. While near the peak, they notice the snow is beginning to thin out, which uncovers the secret hideaway. Are the inhabitants of this hideaway friendly, or have the Phantom and Diana bit off more than they can chew?
What did you think of this story, Jim?
It introduces a made-up tribe, so
It can't be
really
made up. It's in the newspaper. Anything that's in the newspaper is official.
Yep.
But I'm a little bit biased because I've actually got a what do you call it? A Sunday page from this story. But look, what I enjoyed about this story is I enjoyed the continuity, which we've talked about. I enjoyed the communication and the conversation and the adult time between the Phantom and Diana. And hey, look, as a parent with young kids, anytime you can get away without the kids and enjoy some adult time with your wife is kind of nice. So, you know, I enjoyed that. And like the tribe didn't totally suck. Like they were quite self-sufficient. They were
They're very self-sufficient.
yeah, and yeah, they didn't really suck. And because so many times you see introduced tribes and it's just like, oh, they're just not portrayed very well. They're yeah, they're kind of boring. But these guys,
They very much had their own identity. They very much had their own character, and they're not just a clone of another tribe.
yeah, and I think that's probably my biggest bugbear about all these tribes that are being created is that, you know, you've called this tribe something, and then it's like, well, you don't. There's no reason for it to be another tribe that could that story can fit quite well, whether it's the Maori, the Ugan, the Wambisi, the Longo, and this tribe kind of, you know, you can kind of understand why they might be a lost tribe. But look, I don't want to see too many lost tribes.
I like the reason why they are lost or why they've never been discovered before. And the Phantom, I think, states that towards the end. You know, he goes wherever there's justice. You know, wherever he needs to be, and you know, you guys actually don't need me. You guys, there's no war, there's no crime, there's no disease.
Yeah,
there's no injustice happening here.
And that's what and like the Phantom really says is, oh, that's the reason why I don't know about, or whether he says it to himself, I can't remember, but it's like the reason he hasn't come across these guys is because they don't need help from the Phantom, and so you know that is good. But
Yeah,
also
and
like the anger of the Phantom, where he's like, you know, unique culture or not, if anyone has harmed Diana, I'll tear this mountain down with my bare hands. That shows a real, you know,
You really believe he could do it too.
yeah. This is actually the page that I actually own. So this is the 18th of June.
very
So
cool.
just a thing for all the creators out there: if you want to create a new jungle tribe, please make sure that you send some artwork to Germ, and he won't mind at all.
That's a really. I really liked in this story. I really liked the byplay between Phantom and Diana.
Yeah.
Early in the piece, as you know, that whole so I've only got to be nearly assassinated before you remember to take me on a romantic getaway. There's little bits of oh well, do you write about all your girlfriends in the Chronicles? Maybe I now need to read them. And then towards the end, when he frustrates her by going, well, this is my prisoner that I need to return. Thanks for looking after her. And she's like, what? I'm your wife. Why don't you call me your wife? So again, that relationship between the two of them is really dynamic and really authentic. And the way that that's been written has been really cleverly done, I think, and certainly enjoyed that. I also really enjoyed the idea, and it's quite fantastical, obviously, of this Fire Peak tribe being a really highly developed civilization who have created their own power from the natural gifts that they've been given living in a volcano. But they've got they've got a lot of technology, more technology than any other tribe, certainly, and more technology than we would have seen lots of burgeoning civilizations develop. So the fact that they've got, and you've got the screen on there now, Germ, where they've got a library where they chronicle all of the learnings that they have when they send people out into the world to find out what's going on. Then those people all come back, and with bringing back the knowledge of the outside world, but also using that knowledge to make sure that they can stay hidden. It's a really clever idea, I think. I don't know that we've ever gone back to the Fire Peak tribe, and I think it's probably one that would warrant another visit.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of allude that towards the end, where they're talking about all the melting snow caps around the place, and soon the world's eyes will be on the Fire Peak because their snow isn't melting. What's going on over there?
Yeah, and isn't it a salient point that 20 years ago in 2004, Tony DePaul's writing about melting snow caps and environmental change, and not a lot has changed in the real world since then.
Mm.
Oh, we've got electric cars now, so.
Yeah, that's saving the snow caps.
Yeah. Fire Peak is still covered in snow now because we've got electric cars. Look, I don't really have much more to add. It's not the worst story of a new created tribe, which I've talked about before. I enjoyed a lot of the aspects between the Phantom and Diana, and you really get in a lot of these stories, like this last one and then this one as well. There's a lot of the Phantom talking to himself, and you really, I think even back then, 20 odd years ago, Tony DePaul was trying to develop a more thoughtful, more human type of Phantom, and I think he's done it here as well. Like he's thinking about himself. He's showing emotions. He's showing the fact that he loves his wife, and and stuff
He's
like
very
that.
human.
Yeah.
We do shift gears completely as we go into the next story. And as I sort of suggested before, this is the last Sunday story that Graham Nolan worked on. More's the pity. It's called, well, what is it called? It's called The Forbidden Lands, or is it called The Time Skip? I can't see anywhere in the story that tells us definitively one way or the other. But it's The Forbidden Lands or The Time Skip, and Diana's not in this story at all. We just have the Phantom dealing with some pretty weird stuff, Steve.
He is, and before I get too far into it, I think we've had Tony on before, and he mentions one of the things he likes about the Sundays is he gets to be a bit more fantastical with his stories. So I'll talk about this one in a moment. But we've had the Viking fortress raising from the depths. There was another one, the Fire Peak tribe. You can have these bit more fantastical elements. Recently we had I can't remember what they're called, the animals that were less than human or more than human or different from human.
Temple of the Gods.
Not quite human. That's what it was. And so these fantastical elements, and this is one of those stories which really has that fantastical element to it. So Wambezi warriors on a lion hunt trek near to their forbidden lands, where much like the Longo Forest in recent newspaper stories, supernatural happenings are known to happen. The warriors come across a group of white men who have lost an aeroplane and are searching for it as they drive through the lands in old roadsters. Though the men do the Wambesi no harm, they consistently spook the tribe each night at exactly the same time with the revving of their engines and firing of their rifles. Can the Phantom help move these searchers on? And who is flying this mysterious aeroplane that they are so keen on finding?
Now, you on purpose, and I thought that was kind of clever as well, how you've done it, but also how Tony DePaul's done it, where they use the word aeroplane instead of an airplane. And I guess that it goes to show that, maybe we probably haven't paid as much attention as we do now as what, when we did 20 years ago when we were reading these stories. But 20 years ago, even Tony was knee deep in the finer details. So I just thought that was interesting. That's probably the thing that I got out of reading this story was that, hey, Tony was sweating the finer details even back then.
Yeah, because that is a clear plot point that helps establish the fact that this, there is a time loop. There's a group of people stuck in time limbo, if you like. And that's that point that you made just there. The use of the word aeroplane instead of airplane is part of how that clue or that plot point evolves. So really interesting. I thought it was and we saw it also. I mentioned Old Moz in the Viking Fortress mystery. You see him increasingly moving into that seer business, not just a historian of the Phantom, and this is still relatively early in Tony DePaul's run of writing Phantom stories, and you can see that he really does see Moz as having greater depth as a character, not just being a keeper of stories and a historian, but also someone who knows more and can see more than normal people can.
Mm. And look, I've been on the record, I'm not a huge fan of Old Man Moz being a seer, but what Tony has done with Old Man Moz as well as other characters, he's actually made him into a more rounded character, where he's not just a tool in the sense of let's retell a story.
And that is how Leafwalk used him, wasn't it? Like that's how we start a bunch of stories. Let's gather around Old Man Moz, and he'll tell us a story of a past Phantom, and that was pretty much the only use for him as a character. Now he's got, as you say, a lot more depth and a lot more rounded.
Mm. So you guys are both English teachers. So when did the word aeroplane come out, stop being used, and to become an airplane?
Oh, to be honest, I'm not. I was a little surprised by that when I read it. I was like, "Oh, isn't it an aeroplane?" So I certainly would use the word aeroplane when I'm describing that thing that moves through the air. They're pretty much interchangeable. I wouldn't necessarily have picked that word as a point of difference. I suppose when you're writing a story like this, Steve used the word roadster in his write up. I don't think I saw that in the.
It was definitely in the story. That's why I used roadster.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, certainly the artwork, they're roadster vehicles, and they make a big point of the type of guns that they're using, which are obviously older guns as well. But, you've got to draw on every clue that you can. I don't know that airplane would have been the point of differential that I would have come up with, but perhaps that's why I don't write Phantom stories for the papers. Look, again, as a whole story, I think I mean, you can pick any time travel movie you like, I suppose, but, big smacks of Back to the Future, for instance, in this one where things have happened in the past and they continue to happen if you're there at the time. The idea of things being caught in a time loop. They don't really deal at the end with what happens next in terms of has that settled it? Does that mean the fact that the Phantom did get involved and we see how the crash was caused and what happened there, does that let those spirits free? Does the time loop stop? Because it was happening every night up until that point. But yeah, like a bit of a classic time travel story, which is, I guess, not what you normally would expect in a Phantom story.
I guess that's the beauty about having Old Man Moz. If you introduce that, you can kind of introduce that fantastical element, and it kind of makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, the typical trope of the female protagonist or character, in this case, Beryl Markham. She's obviously a fill-in for Amelia Earhart, or I don't think she's real, Beryl Markham. I didn't bother to look that up. But the fact that she forms a crush on the Phantom, despite initially being really quite fearful of him, is pretty typical too.
No, she's real.
Oh, well, there you go. And I call myself a history teacher.
With all the other attention to details that Tony's put in here, I'd say that I'd say that she was real without even looking.
So she was born October 1902, 1902, died 3rd of August 1986, and she was a Kenyan avatar born in England and was an adventurer, racehorse trainer, and also an author.
So there you go.
Wikipedia.
He does say in there somewhere, but the Phantom says something about, she died 20 years ago at the age of 80. That sounds pretty accurate for the time of writing.
Yep.
Yeah, and so while they never met, you made mention of Amelia Earhart. But while they never met, they were both flying around the same time, and they did comment on each other's careers and stuff like that. But look, there's Google. If that perks your interest, go onto Google and you can find out more, just like we did.
All right. Now, Jim, do you know the story of why Graham Nolan stopped working on the Sundays? And I think it was Tony, no, hang on. Tony Ryan, Paul Ryan, Paul Ryan, Tony DePaul, Paul Ryan. It was Paul Ryan who took over from Graham Nolan, wasn't it? So what was the story there?
Okay, so the story that I've been told, and I won't spend too much long. We do discuss this in more detail with our actual podcast with Graham Nolan. So if you want the full story and not just based on my memory, I would recommend that. You can listen to that. And I'm just trying to remember what episode that was. That was 142. I was going to say 48, but 142 we actually discussed with Graham Nolan. Now, from what I understand, and this is talking to Paul Ryan, some other people at KFS, Graham Nolan, and stuff like that, is that Graham Nolan took over the Sundays. He was a long-time Phantom fan. So this was always one of his high mark things that he had done. He was working on, was it Judge Parker, I think it was, or one of the other ones, one of the other newspaper stories ventures. He was working on that. He got offered the Phantom strip because Fred Fredericks was stepping down, so he took over that. He always wanted to do the Phantom daily and Sundays. That was one thing that he wanted to do, was both. And then I think he was promised it or told that when George Olsen stops, you can take over that as well. But that went to Paul Ryan, and then I think he had interests in other areas. He started a comic strip called, there's one with an alligator and a pelican, and then he also is doing Monster Island, I believe, as well. So seeing he didn't get the Phantom with that, and then his other work for those comic strips had kind of taken off, he decided to go with that as well. So it was a real sliding doors moment. And then when he quit that, obviously Paul Ryan took over the Sundays, did that for both of them, and then he stepped aside for one of them, which I think was Eduardo, and then he passed away, and then went back to Paul Ryan for a couple of weeks, and then Terry Beattie. So that's kind of like a quick 1-2 minute what happened there. But look, we do talk about it in more details in our podcast with Graham Nolan. It's an interesting discussion, talking to him about what his feelings were.
Absolutely. So I assume the link will be in the show notes, Germ, and people can go to episode 142 to hear about that in more detail from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Now, what is interesting is that we now move to another Graham Nolan created story, but he's not the artist on this one. He's the author. And this is The Boy from San Diablo. It's a 2003 story, so it actually predates any of the Sundays that we've just talked about. Given that it was published on the 1st of May 2003, I imagine Nolan's actually scripted this in 2001 or two. And this one's got art by Kari Lapanan. It has been published by Frew before, but not for 21 years since issue 1368 in 2003. The Boy from San Diablo. Did you? Oh, well, sorry. We'll go to the plot synopsis first. Steve?
Rightio. The Boy from San Diablo. A young, recently orphaned child, George, is brought to San Diablo to live under the care of his uncle, General de Guzman, who rules the land with an iron fist. Now, has the general sent for his nephew because he has George's best interests at heart, or is it his own interests that has brought the boy to his homeland?
One of the things that I really liked about this is that, because in the podcast again, Graham Nolan does talk about his skills as a writer as well, and because he actually wrote the Sinbad story, which was in Annual 1. So he was the first Phantom newspaper artist who wrote his own story. Well, credited to writing his own story. I get the feeling that Wilson McCoy wrote his own stories as well, but that's nothing's been proven for that. That's just a little theory of mine.
Put your tin hat back away, Jim.
Yeah, I'll put my tin hat. Well done. But in the podcast, he did talk about that because we asked him why he wrote this story and he didn't draw it as well. And he talked about how he wanted to actually write a story and focus on that side of the sandpit, I guess. So it was in reading this, it's like a whole mashup of Lee Falk stories. You've got the orphan child, you've got dictator being overthrown, you've got the Phantom being chased around by on a tropical island, which reads something out of Governor and Susie type of thing. So there's a whole lot of Lee Falk mashup stories in this, and I really enjoyed it. What about you, Steve? Did you enjoy the story?
I did. Yeah. I did enjoy it. It's and just like you said, it's the old cat and mouse. Escaping the army or the police of the area, and then you got the old. Finally, does get caught and thrown in jail. But who is this prisoner that he's with? And it seems like a gentle old man. Why would a gentle old man be thrown in prison? He obviously has done nothing wrong apart from be who he is. But I like the escapism. I like the way that Phantom gets out. Of course, there was something else that you'd mentioned that I can't quite remember what it was now. So I love. Yeah, it's hard to find good stuff. So you've still got the humour there as well. That's important in the Phantom comic.
Like when he gets his getaway vehicle, which is the little golf luggage thing, and then he goes, "Oh, this isn't very fast." And I've driven those.
Humor just sprinkle around it.
Yeah. They're not very fast at all, not like a car or something. So it's a real sliding doors moment. Like, could have we seen 20, 30 years of Graham Nolan doing the Phantom newspaper stories? We'll never know, but have we missed out on something? Could have we? You see him writing stories here. I know he did a couple of covers for Team Fantomen for their, have we missed out on potentially 20, 30 years of Graham Nolan doing the Phantom?
Yeah, it's a question, that you'd love to know the answer to, I suppose. And what would that universe look like, or how would his artwork have evolved and all that sort of stuff on the Phantom as it went? I must say that having just read 6 Graham Nolan illustrated stories, and I mean this with absolutely no disrespect to Kari Lapanen, but I missed his artwork. As I go into this, as I went into this story, I was like, oh, okay, it's a different style of art, and I was really enjoying the Graham Nolan artwork. So Carrie Lappinen, he's one of my, he's on the list of fandom artists that I enjoy, no doubt. But it just, it was a bit jarring, a bit different when you just finished reading 180 odd pages, 160 something pages of Graham Nolan illustrations. Then you get Carrie Lappinen, and you're like, oh. The first 2 pages of the story, particularly the for those who came in late page from Kari, outstanding. Absolutely, I'd love to have that as the original artwork to that. But then it all, it's much simpler, much lighter lines, a lot less shadow and stuff that is used for this particular story. Yeah. As I say, I can understand why it's been included because it's a Graham Nolan contribution to the fandom universe. And so, and we'll talk about this more in detail shortly, I'm sure. But I can understand why it's in the book. But I missed his artwork. Let's get on to the color pages, the Moonstone contribution of this book. So this is the 5 Days of the Dragon, chapters 1 through 5. Now, I actually just recently reviewed this in our New Year's resolution special, not knowing at all, of course, that it was about to appear in the annual. So for my thoughts in detail, go back and listen to, what are we doing? 273. It must have been issue 271, episode 271, just about. So only a couple of podcasts ago that I talked about 5 Days of the Dragon. It's a 5-parter. Graham Nolan's only involved in one of the 5 parts, which is an interesting thing. Dudley does address that in his message from the publisher. Do you want to give us a pretty quick synopsis of this one, Steve?
Very, very quick. An ancient, powerful Chinese artifact is being sought after in a race between the Sing Brotherhood and generations of phantoms, namely the 3rd, 11th, 16th, 19th, and concluding with the 21st.
Very good. So it's 5 chapters. One chapter deals with each of those 5 generations of fandom, and it's only a little 8 to 12 page story for each of those. We've got a range of creators. In fact, there's 5 different artists and 5 different authors for the 5 different chapters. And Mike Bullock in the podcast we did with him talked about the fact that he and Ron Mars, who wrote chapter 1, collaborated on what the story arc was going to look like. So there was obviously guidance for everybody there. But Graham Nolan was only involved in the 3rd chapter, so the story about the 16th Phantom, and that was written by Chuck Dixon, who he would also collaborate with on the story from the cards, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. So as I said, I've talked about this one very recently. Steve, what did you think about the 5 Days of the Dragon story?
I really enjoyed it up to the end. Now, I haven't listened to your review, Dan. I'll have to go back and go see what you think. But I really liked how each fandom was different across all generations. I haven't had a chance. I was hoping to have a bit of time today and check out the fandom Bible just to see if the 11th personality was as it is depicted in here. He's quite vicious, quite violent. He's quite lost to the cause. I think he even says he becomes a ghost who walks rather than a person. I thought that was really interesting. And each story element each chapter is set in a different time, of course, with different generations, but also different scenarios, different places, which I really, really like. The one thing that I did not like at all was how dumb the 21st Phantom was in the last part. That was idiotic. It was stupid, and it nearly ruined the whole thing for me.
Yeah.
It reeked, and I know Dan addresses this in his review, but it reeked of trying to wrap up the storyline. Like, how are we going to get it that they're going to get the 5 pieces? Oh, let's just have the Phantom bring them. It kind of reeked of trying to fit a proper story into 1 or 2 pages. Let's just do it like this.
The way I would have done it was to bring along fake pieces. I think would have been able to sort that problem out.
But then you don't have the big dramatic dragon towards the end, and stuff like that.
Something else out. It's also happening in a storm.
Yeah.
But it became unphantom-like he can't resist a pretty girl. I think he's had since 1936 resisting all the pretty girls apart from Diana. It's all them that's swoon over him, not the other way around. It left a bad taste in my mouth, which is unfortunate because I like the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah. Look, this is the Graham Nolan artwork here. Really enjoy. So this is the third one. This is the Phantom Cowboy, so to speak. The Phantom, and this is the beauty about the Phantom, is that the Phantom works in almost any scenario. The first scenario was a good jungle one. The second one was kind of like during the French English wars. Now you've got the Phantom Cowboy with Indians and cowboys. It's then you've got wartime Phantom. It's just some great. It goes to show that the Phantom can work in almost every scenario.
Yeah, yeah. So this story was published in 2007. So again, this is Graham Nolan. I guess he very recently he was just wrapping up his run on the Sundays. He was well experienced with the character, and I think you can see it through his work on his chapter here. It's a really dynamic Phantom. Again, he's brought those facial expressions, he's brought the energy and the action to this story as well. So, if we focus on his work in this annual special, I thought that it was a real highlight of the 5 chapters.
Yeah.
But not saying anyone else, I think the artwork across all of it has been great. And all different, but all great in their own ways.
Yeah. Now, I was just going to say, I do agree that Dudley made the right decision to include the full 5 parts.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, it would have almost been a bit of a damn if you do, damn if you don't moment, but I'm glad he included all 5 parts.
Yeah, I would agree with that because, as I did happen to read it recently, but if I hadn't picked up that book for that New Year's special, I would not have read this story before. And then to just read chapter 3 would have been a bit weird. So, so I am glad it was included. A point of interest, just again, having just read it in the Moonstone Annual, the colours are actually not too bad in the Frew. Some of the darker pages, and if I look particularly at what was the first chapter, I think, is quite a dark story. A lot of it takes place at night. It looks fairly muddy and not. It doesn't pop off the page as it did on the glossy pages of the Moonstone book. But as a general rule, and again, particularly for the Graham Nolan pages, it actually doesn't look too bad. So I know Frew does cop a bit of a pizzling for the way that the colours bleed out on the paper quality that they use. It's not so good on the dark pages. It's a lot better on the bright pages.
So while we're talking about colour, would have you liked to see the whole annual in colour?
Yeah, I think so. I'm used to the annuals being in black and white, of course, and I can understand the reasoning for having it in black and white because it's cheaper to produce for a start, and therefore it's cheaper for me to buy. I mean, it's still a $25 book. Would I have paid $30 for it to be in color? That's starting to be an expensive book, $30. So, but that said, and we've seen it. If you're on the YouTube, you've seen the dailies, the Sundays in color. They exist in color. It is a bit of a shame that didn't make it into the Frew pages.
What's interesting about the price point, though, Dan? Yes, it's $25 Australian. New Zealand's actually cheap. I always thought New Zealand was a bit pricier than Australia, often by 50 cents or $1 or so. It's $21.50 New Zealand. Since when did New Zealand have a better exchange rate than us?
That's a good question. I don't know.
That's a very good point, Steve.
As a point of comparison, the last year's annual in Australia was $18.50 and New Zealand was $20.
So it's a $7 jump in the annual. Was that how much color was in that?
None.
None. Yeah, none at all, and it was only 196 pages compared to the 244 from this year.
Oh yeah. So there's a blowout in page number and
so basically an extra 50 pages, all of which are in color. So
yeah. When you got to the middle of I think we finished talking about stories and actually talking about the put together of the book. When I was getting towards the middle of the book, did you find it some of the panels almost getting cut off because of the the spine, I guess, for lack of a better word? Really had to kind of stretch it and look in between.
So for those who are on YouTube, this is page 158, 159. You kind of have to stretch it to be able to read the speech bubbles that are from the towards the, what do you call it, the page center or the spine section.
Yeah.
For me, that was the bigger bugbear than if it's in color or black and white. I need to actually be able to read the story with that.
And I don't know if, while we're on that sort of thing, I don't know if it was just my copy or not, but I actually had quite a number of pages. I'm not sure if you can see that, where the print has got a big white line down the middle.
What page number is that?
I didn't have big white lines, but I had bleeding.
That's page 127 and 128 as one example. It has quite a number, probably 6 or 8 of the pages in a little fold in the page, I think.
I've got on mine, I've got a kind of like an indent on the page, but it hasn't actually affected the what would you call it,
the print quality.
Yeah, the print quality.
Yeah,
I think that's just a well, yeah,
might be just my book.
Yeah, probably just your book.
Yeah, mine doesn't have that, Dan. But I did have parts where particularly on the darker, more intense pages, where it would kind of bleed over to the facing page.
Yep.
Like a bit of an imprint.
So it hasn't dried. The print hasn't, or the ink hasn't dried properly. So when they put the book together, it's a bit transfer.
That happened, a little bit. Not enough, but it happened once or twice. I think I noticed a couple of pages. I was looking, hang on, how's that got in there? That doesn't match what's on the page behind it. Thinking it was a see-through, but now it's from the page opposite.
Yeah.
I did like so I'll just quickly talk about, I like the fact that we got I like the theme. I like having a themed annual. Through the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years have done that. Whether it was been Cyberry 3 years ago, the last 2 with this, you've had the war theme, you've had the girl theme, you've had the Eden theme. I do like themes a lot better than just a chuck together of so I wonder what could be the next possible theme. Do you go a artist, like do you do another Cyberry theme so you can get some Cyberry stories in there? Do you do a Wilson McCoy theme, or do you do, say, like a European artist like Jamie Valve or Carrie Lapinan or something like that, or do you do a writer like a David Bishop? Or
I think one of the reasons this one worked across the 2 years, the 23 and the 24 annual, is because between the 2 books, you're able to collate pretty much almost everything that Graham Nolan was involved in the Phantom universe. So, if I'm Graham Nolan, I think I'm pretty stoked. I can pick up these 2 books and literally everything I've ever done for the Phantom is in there, which does raise the question, I suppose. There is the story that he created with Chuck Dixon for the trading cards. That's the only Phantom story that's been published that he was involved in that is not in these books. He also has about, I think we counted before, 6 covers that he's done for various publishers that could have been used as splash pages or could have been printed in the back of these books. I feel like, you've gone so far to getting almost everything. It's 95% of his Phantom work has come together in these 2 books. It would have been nice to see those last little things come in as well, just so that you've got a complete Graham Nolan collection of Phantom work.
And just leading on that there, Dan, mentioning the covers, same issue that we had last year, Graham Nolan hasn't done the cover, and this is taking nothing away from Jason Paulus, who's done an outstanding cover. And if you look through it, there's hints of not every story, you couldn't fit them all in there, but there's hints of stories across the front and back page covers, and it's a phenomenal job. But why hasn't Graham Nolan done the covers?
Agreed. That does seem like a big misstep. I'm surprised.
I like the point that you make, that Sorry, I was just going to say, I like the point that you made at about it's, you said 95. I would say it's probably 90 or 85% there with the cover, with some of those other things you said. But yeah, it's almost there.
Yeah, and just a very minor quibble. I'm surprised to hear you say Jason Paulos did this cover because if you look on the inside, it's clearly credited to Jeff Weigel.
Oh, really? Sorry, I looked at the signature rather than the publisher
That does seem
details.
to be Jason's artwork and his signature on the front cover. I suppose at least in that sense they've got the same artist to do both books, the cover of both books. But yeah, it really, really should have been Graham Nolan. I think to have done the covers for those.
I do like the little extras though, like the little trivia, the little articles and stuff just scattered throughout it. You've got the splash pages of artwork throughout the Moonstone Annual, just things like that that I think does, like what we said before, the annual is actually a very good annual. It's almost there. It's the print quality is pretty good. The paper, like the stock for the cover, is very
Yeah,
thick.
yeah,
That was the first thing I noticed. I picked it up and I thought, oh wow, this is actually quite a heavy book. The the thickness, you're not going to be able to see it as I try on YouTube and all that. But if you touch it, it's very thick. It's almost yeah. It's almost there, and I love those little trivia's. I remember reading them being included in the annuals as a younger reader and all that, and trying to asking myself these questions and seeing if I got them, and I'm sure if I did it, there's at least a couple of other fans that have also enjoyed it as well.
absolutely. And the little essay by Kevin Patrick, and there's a couple of little things by Jim Shepard as well. There was one that threw me where it was like I think it was Jim Shepard writing about weird things about the Phantom's engagement story. I was like, oh, that's really interesting to read, but I wonder why they've included that. That seems like a bizarre thing. Until then, of course, I picked up the replica, and it is the Phantom's engagement story. So it's actually quite thoughtful in the sense that there's a little spiel on the Phantom's engagement in the main book that then links to the replica that attaches with it, which I know the replica is not everyone's cup of tea, and it's an age-old question. Should we, would we prefer the replica in the annual, or would something else be better? I still like getting the replicas. I actually store these in a separate folder. So I've got replica 1 through to 34 now, missing a few of the Phantom Goes to War. And I did enjoy, going through it. And again, I always love the replicas, how they actually open landscape. And you can see why so many of the originals must have been destroyed when kids are just opening it and ripping it across the top as they open the book in the first instance. But and while I'm on it, I actually enjoyed the Phantom's engagement as a story, reading through it again this time. So yeah, I enjoyed having that in there.
I would have liked to seen, look, Graham Nolan, maybe a poster. Graham Nolan's done, and he's done this. It was a Moonstone cover. If you're on YouTube, I'll show it. But it's of the Phantom down by the Phantom Devil down by the shoreline. You've got a burning ship in the background. That would have worked really good as a poster.
I think you could still have the replica and the poster. I think we can have best of both worlds.
Yeah. Another one could have been, I'm assuming they've probably still got heaps and heaps of packets of the recent trading card series, which is featuring artwork by Graham Nolan. You could have included a packet of those in there as well, or instead of the other two. But what's interesting is you guys make mention of the page count. So this is actually the equal most page numbers in an annual since 2017. So 2024 and 2021, it's got 244 pages. Last year you said was what, 196?
Correct. Yep.
And then you got to go all the way back to 2017, which is actually 260 pages. and then 2016 was 252 pages, and every other, all from the Frew crew, and majority of Jim Shepard's ones were 244 pages and below. So this is actually quite a page-heavy book.
Yeah, but reads really easily. You know, it wasn't a chore of any description to get through and read this for the podcast. It's really enjoyable to go back and read some of these stories that I haven't read for a long, long time. A couple of them I don't think that I'd read before at all. Actually, I must have missed them. The Time Skip, I hadn't read that before. On the Trail of an Assassin, I hadn't read that before. So it was good to see these stories for the first time, because again, just because they were printed once by a Frew 20 years by Frew in a regular issue 20 years ago does not mean that everybody's read that story. So
yeah, very good point.
And I agree. It was not a chore to get through it. Apart from the Time Skip one, I was reading that maybe a little bit late at night, and I kept drifting off when I was reading that one. But everything else held my attention really, really well.
That's probably that's probably my poorest story. So I don't, I can kind of understand why it was a bit more of a chore.
All right. Well, anything else to add, guys, as we wrap up our conversation about the 2024 annual?
No.
I think it's a great annual. I've really enjoyed reading it, and kudos to Frew for putting it together. It's a massive task. So thank you, Dudley, and thank you all there at Frew for putting this out for us.
I just want to suggest another idea for a themed annual could be the different Phantoms. So you could start off with the number 1 Phantom, and then next year it could be the 1, then it could be the 2, then the 3, then the 4, and you just got to choose, the top, 8, 10 stories or something like that.
Well, that would certainly
organise annuals right there.
Yeah,
that'd organise their themes for the next 20 years, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if Dudley was smart, he could do it all now, and then he can have an extra week off on holidays.
Maybe you could do half the generation. So let's say next year it would be 1 to 12, and then after that it's 13 to 20, or 13, something like that. Or, 1 to 10, and 11 to 20.
Because there would be Phantoms, wouldn't there? That there's not, enough stories to fill a 100-page book.
No, I reckon there will be enough for at least 150, 200 pages for all of them.
Okay.
You reckon?
Yeah, and then if there is one, you could probably get one of the Frew creator teams to create a couple of stories to put them in.
Crikey, 7 years from now, we're going to need a story about the 14th Phantom. Come on, guys. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening or for watching. As I said at the outset, the website is chroniclechamber.com. You can certainly head there for all of your up-to-date Phantom news and opinions and reviews and all the rest of it. If you've got any thoughts about the themes that Frew should be using or what you'd like to see in future annuals, probably contact Frew. They've got more likely to be able to act on it than us. But anything you want to share with us, please email us at chroniclechamber@gmail.com or hit us up on any of the socials. We'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, your opinions via any of those platforms, and certainly in the comments on the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us there, or as I said at the outset, whatever your favourite podcast app is. And if you're on iTunes, please give us a like or a subscribe, just so that it promotes us in the algorithms and all the rest of it. Anyway, until next time, thanks very much for tuning in and paying attention, and looking forward to the next time we get together for a podcast. Until then, happy Fantoming, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Happy Fantoming.